Morning guys, Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. I've had a lot of questions in the last few videos about fatwood, and I've shown a couple times how to process and collect fatwood, but I thought maybe it was worth covering again to go through the whole thing of where to collect it and how to collect it, to how to process it down to use it to make fire with both open flame or a ferrocerium rod. So to take a quote from Morse Kahansky's book on bushcraft, anytime you stop moving in a cold weather environment, the first thought you should have is starting a fire. If you are collecting things along your way with possum mentality, you should already have some of these things collected in your haversack along the way so that when you have to start a fire, you can do it easily. What I always look for is pine trees, especially red pine. Red pine is better than white pine for collecting fatwood or pitchwood. It's easy to find pines from a distance because they're evergreens. So in the winter, if you get on high ground, you'll be able to see where the pine groves are at because they'll be green and everything else will be brown. So once you've found a pine grove, you just need to find a red pine that has a lot of lower branches sticking out of it like this one does that aren't broken off. And to me, the ones that are at a sharp angle coming down into the tree generally will collect more fat or pitch or sap in the crotch than ones that are coming straight out of the tree. That just works for me. So I find one that's sticking up in the air a little bit that's not bone dead. I want the thing to have a little bit of life left to it. That's probably going to have a lot of pitch in it. And it'll be right there in that crotch. So the closer I can cut that off, the better off I'm going to be. And I'm going to get about a 12-inch stick of fatwood out of that I can split down several times like we've done in other videos. But I'm going to show you how to do that today. So let's take this branch here and we'll cut this off with our bow saw and we'll look at it first. Now I could smell that as I was cutting it. And if I smell the end of that wood and it smells like turpentine, it's going to have a lot of fatwood in it. I'm also looking for color. The darker orange it is, the more fatwood it's going to have in it. We've got about a 3-foot branch here. We're going to cut another piece of it off about right here and process this down to see how much fatwood we've actually got in here. Okay, so I know I'm looking to cut off about a foot of this from the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use what's called a plumber's vise, and I'm going to put this in between my leg like this. Okay, now I'm looking to cut about a foot off of this thing to process down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this underneath one leg and lock it in with the other leg, and that's called a plumber's vise. That gives me an area out here that's safe to saw. That's nowhere near the triangle of death in here where my femoral arteries and the family jewels are at. Once I've cut that off, I want to look at that end and see if there's still fatwood in there. It smells still. It's still got some dark orange to it. So we should be able to split this down and get what we need for fire starting. Okay, we've got a pretty good natural anvil here with a down pine. And sometimes down pines are places to find good fatwood too, but you really need to look to the root ball for that. You would have some in some of these crotch areas as well, but the root ball is going to hold the most. So we just need a good hardwood baton here and a good anvil point. We'll split this down. See what we got inside here. See what the good fatwood content is on this thing. Okay, I can see some real good dark orange right in here. That's going to be a really good candidate for some good fatwood right there. Now all of this will burn well, but the areas with the most fatwood are going to burn the best. Alright, so let's take one of these pieces that we cut off here and let's make a little feather stick here if we can. Now the way this wood acts is going to tell you a lot about how much fatwood is in it. When you cut through it, it'll feel thick where the fatwood is. It'll feel thin where there isn't much fatwood. Let me separate those cuttings. Now, if this has got good amounts of fatwood in it, it should take off pretty quick with just a few seconds from a cigarette lighter. I've seen better than that, for sure, but that's not horrible. There's plenty of fatwood in there to start a fire, beyond the shadow of a doubt. Using this in conjunction with 20 more feather sticks of the same size or better, you would be able to get this stick to catch on fire and give you plenty of extended burn time to start a good hot fire. Okay, let's put that guy out. Now let's see about processing some of this down to take a spark with a ferrocerium rod. Okay, so what I've done here is I've just cut a notch out of this down tree to give us a good flat anvil area here. You can see it's pretty rotten. Just to give us a place to put some shavings. And I've scraped the bark off of this edge of the stick because there's a good amount of fatwood right here that's really dark and orange. So that's what I really want to use if I'm going to try to start a ferro rod fire with this and get ignition from ferrocerium rod. I'm going to want this to be shaved down very tiny. And that's exactly the way they make the things like what you buy called Maya dust. What they do is they take a machine probably and they scrape the shavings off of this just like this. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to accomplish making a pile of those shavings. And you'll know if you're getting into fatwood, you use the spine of your knife for this. And you'll know if you've got good fatwood because you'll feel it. It'll feel thick when you're pulling your knife through it. And those curls, those small shavings like that are what you're going to want for ferro rod ignition. So just keep the knife stationary. Pull the piece of wood towards you. Try to collect all of it on top of the anvil, or whatever you're using as a base to collect these shavings. And just continually turn the piece so that you're getting a good sharp angle to pull up against the spine of your knife. And this is another reason why it's so important to have that good 90-degree spine on the back of that knife. And you want to continue to do that until you've got a pile of shavings probably the size of a silver dollar. Especially if you've got wood that doesn't have an absolute ton of resin in it. This has got a couple spots in it that have got real good resin, but for the most part it's not perfect. You can see that real dark area right there. That's going to be real good. Okay, so now that I've got this pile with all these fine shavings exposed, and I've got a lot of surface area, I want the biggest ferrocerium rod I can get my hands on. This one is about a 6-inch by 1/4 by 1/2 inch rod. It's the same one that we saw on our website. But something like this is going to allow you, once you get the oxidization off of it, something like this is going to allow you to throw a massive amount of material onto that fire lay. And that's what you've got to have. The longer this ferrocerium rod is, the more material you can remove in one stroke. And the better 90-degree spine you've got on this knife, the more molten material is going to come off of here, because you're going to take a thicker amount of material or a larger amount of material off this rod with every one of these pulls. You never want to push the knife away from the rod. You always want to pull the rod toward the knife, just like this, okay? That's going to be your action. And you pull up and back. You bury that knife in there really good. with your hand and direct those sparks right into this pile. And it should be that quick and easy. Now if I'd cut this log out and had this log at my camp, I would probably start my fire right on this log. Okay folks, well I appreciate you joining me out here today for this short video on how to collect and process pitchwood, or fatwood as it's sometimes called, any place that you can find a connection point to the tree, or right at the base of the roots of a pine tree, especially a red pine. There's going to be a lot of that fatwood, heavy sap material that's going to be highly combustible. Simple ways to process it. It takes a little bit more to process it for ignition with a ferrocerium rod than it does with a match or open flame. Both will work. Again, 90% of your success, almost 100% of your success with fire and building fire is going to be in the processing of the material. So take your time. As you can see, this didn't take very long to actually talk through it, harvest it off the tree, process it down, and actually get to a point where we had flame with the ferrocerium rod. So if you wait a little bit too long, you get stuck, look for a pine as fast as you can. I'm Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. I thank you for your support. I thank you for everything you do for me, for my business, and for everyone affiliated with the Pathfinder School. Thanks, guys.